Okay, well, good afternoon and welcome to this broadcast sports tech innovation forum on esports panel. I'm Cara Kotschy. I'll be hosting today, and with me, I'm delighted to be joined by Julian Tan, who is head of digital business initiatives and esports at Formula One. Cameron Reid, business development manager, esports at Ross Video. Cameron's joining us from LA, so it's very early for him. And Jose Garnes, head of content at SailGP. Welcome, guys, and thanks for joining us. Now, we've only got half an hour for this, so we better crack on. One of the beneficiaries of the wholesale cancellation of traditional live sports during the lockdown has been esports. As soon as lockdown was announced, a whole long list of new esport tournaments were launched, enabling gamers to join in from their homes and providing sports fans with content that was close to the real sports they were missing. This includes the F1 Virtual GP Series, the Drone Champions League, the Isolation e-racing series, the Zwift Tour, and the FA's Football Staying Home Cup. BT Sport, Eurosport, and other leading broadcasters have committed to giving more airtime to esports, such as Squash is looking at what opportunities there are in gamifying in the sport. So this panel is going to debate the rise of esports, what lockdown has meant for this growth, and what traditional sport broadcasters can do to offer esports fans more. So I think I'm going to throw the first question to Julian and Jose. So this boom time for esports that we've been talking about during and since the first lockdown includes the F1's well-received virtual GP series and the SailGP Grand Final. So can you explain the format of these tournaments and how they've been received by traditional sports audiences? Julian, do you want to kick off?
Sure. Thanks very much, Cara, and hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I think at Formula One, esports has been a real growth asset for us when we entered in 2017 when we launched our first esports activities. And we've grown really dramatically over the course of, call it 36, 38 months since launching. And obviously accelerated by the pandemic this year, a lot of our activities around esports have grown quite tremendously. I think the notable example of this, as you mentioned, Cara, was over lockdown when, our main product in the main race that we put on at Formula One, those were canceled or either postponed because of COVID. So we were suddenly in a position where we were thinking of how else can we continue to race, and esports emerged as a real opportunity area for us to exploit to continue racing. We continue to race through our esports product in the virtual GPs, where we basically put together a competition on our official Formula One game and invited our real life Formula One drivers along with, up and coming racing drivers, as well as legends in the sport, and also wider celebrities to participate in coming together, providing some fun entertainment for our fans who undoubtedly, during this time wanted to see their drivers, even if they couldn't race in the real world, they wanted to see them race even virtually. And I think we recognize the role that esports could play this year in particular in continuing to deliver racing content for our fans and engage them, whilst also delivering value to our sponsors and delivering content to our broadcast partners, essentially allowing us to keep some of our lights on at a time where our main race had to go dark. As you said, it was really well received. We had over 33 million people tune in to our virtual Grand Prix series. And it's really just shone a light on esports really during that time, because, I think really esports over the past few years has been experiencing a meteoric rise, and it's becoming more and more popular in the mainstream side of things. But I think that during the first half of this year, when it was thrust into the spotlight, a lot more people, I think, were exposed to esports. And once they've watched our virtual Grand Prix, watched our virtual racing that we put on, from going to saying, why would I watch someone play a video game, to actually saying, oh, this is actually really interesting. This is really compelling live racing content I can really engage with. So yeah, it's been a wild ride this year on the esports front. And I think that there are a lot of things coming out as we sort of slowly return to some form of normality, start to take some learnings, I suppose, to implement as part of our esports strategy and also our racing strategy in the future.
So well received on the F1 front. And Jose, would you sort of paint a similar picture?
Yes, in the fact that similar to F1, we already had a plan to do esport series, not to the scale to F1 because we're in a different kind of stage to what F1 is at the moment and where our sport is and what we're growing. We have just been established in 2018, so we're just starting our second season in real life. But we already were thinking that esports was an avenue that we wanted to be in, and even though we didn't have the scale, we were able to adapt to it. So we already have a season that was going to start in February and it was going to come at the end of September. So for us, what the pandemic did was just to accelerate that change and put our focus into this championship. And what we did it was to follow our pre-COVID calendar of events that we were going to have with virtual events. And all of it was going to culminate in our SailGP Grand Final, which was going to give a place to the e-sailing World Championship, another esport event that was organized by the game developer and the World Sailing Federation, and also a prize to allow our winner to join one of the crews as a passenger ride. So that actually had a pretty cool experience and a prize that we could put into this event. But for us, the big gain out of the esport and this situation is engagement. We cannot compete against established sports or established video games. But where we are able to use this area is to increase our engagement and increase the education of new fans into SailGP and sailing. You know, sailing is a very difficult sport to grasp if you have never had a first experience on a boat. But suddenly when you have an SailGP, a game, we break that barrier. The entry level it gets reduced to a phone or a laptop, an iPad. So we were able to engage with a new audience and educate them on what the sport is about, and then kind of plant the seed to say, when we come back in real life, this is what you can expect. But in the meantime, you can practice and hone your skills on the game. And actually, there's a competitive series that if you compete and really put the time into, there's an end goal for it. So I think for us, that's the difference between established sport entities, but it's still a great opportunity to tap in and show that this is the future for us.
So I guess from that, what I'm kind of gaining is that you're going to see a real life, from when the sporting events comes back, you're expecting to see growth in your live sporting audiences as well, off the back of the esports gaming.
Exactly. I think when you compare, what you want as a brand is engagement, right? And you can quantify that on social media by likes, comments, shares. But then in real life, what you want engagement is someone who is playing your game, who is kind of devoting time to familiarize with the rules, getting competitive, and then asking their friends to take part. And I think Formula One has done that very well, and it shows what it can do, and you can see the athletes and drivers engaging with that. So for us as a sport that we're trying to educate an audience, that sort of engagement is priceless. Being able to educate them that way, I can create a video trying to explain what sailing is, but actually allowing someone to get the control of a boat.
Sure. And I guess as well that must invite some growth into younger audiences then, given the gaming audience is so much younger.
Yes, but I think when we talk about sport, it's a traditional medium, right? So we cannot forget also about the traditional audience that who already like the sport. Then you can also bring them into esport and show them, hey, if you really like sailing, there's a game for you to take part.
Yeah.
And it kind of continues our relationship that you don't have to wait for the broadcast to be on, or you don't have to wait for the live feed to come up. You can actually be playing our game 24/7.
Okay. Thank you. Cameron, over to you. Can you tell us a little bit about the technology involved, probably working in the backgrounds to enable esports to get on air during the lockdown and remain on air throughout the pandemic?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Cameron Reed. A little bit about myself too. I've been in esports production since 2012. I started as a production assistant at dumpy little studio in Rancho Cucamonga, California, which is a town you should have never heard of. But we were doing StarCraft 2 streams. And so on this panel, I kind of represent that like old school esports. And it's awesome that new brands and new companies are getting into esports. But we've been doing it for a while here, you know, and the benefit of being one of these even traditional esports during COVID was that most of the time we play our regular season, if that's what you want to call it, online. There's certainly exceptions to that rule. You've got the Overwatch League, Call of Duty League, League of Legends with their LCS, LEC, where they all play live together in a studio or on a stage. But those kind of represent the exception to the rule. Most esports is played online, and then there's a large live event at the end of the regular season where then everybody finally comes and meets face to face. So we knew the tournaments were still going to go on. The regular seasons were still going to go on when COVID hit because, well, there's nothing unsafe about the guys playing from their homes anyway. The challenge was keeping the show on the air, right? And, you know, we can't do, obviously, the traditional method of source acquisition and production on site, right? Which would be like a truck at a stadium or an arena because everybody's packed into a truck. And then we really can't do Remy anymore either, where you took source acquisition, left it on site, but you took production and moved it off site. Because even Remy relies on being physically in a control room together. And that's very difficult to maintain safe social distancing standards and safety when you're packed into a control room. And I've been in a lot of control rooms in my day, and there's usually a fair bit of yelling and shouting back and forth. And I can only imagine the clouds of virus that get shared in that environment. So we had to, the way that we had to respond to that was taking Remy to the next level, which was distributing the operation and control to where everybody can work from home. So source acquisition can still be done on site, but now instead of having production off site but in a central location, we've distributed it. So I can direct a show from my home office right here, where I can get multi-viewers on monitor one. I can have a comms panel to hook into a web portal that connects me to the entire production crew, right? And this was how esports has largely responded, using VPN technologies or dashboard proxies, or in some cases even just TeamViewer, to remote into their actual control room devices, their hardware devices, sort of at their home studio, right? And this is one of the areas that Ross has really been focused to try to help esports, because when it first happened, a lot of the companies immediately switched to these software-only sort of services, right? Like cloud-based production. But it was all software only, and those solutions, while they're really cool for what they are, they kind of lack a lot of the flexibility and horsepower that you're usually used to for doing live production, specifically as it relates to graphics and instant replay. Esports relies heavily on data, for example, for graphics. There really aren't very many, if any, software solutions on the market right now that incorporate very well with data and then also can do real-time 3D graphics rendering, right? It's only hardware solutions available right now that can do that. So that was one part of the puzzle that the software doesn't do it alone, right? And then instant replay, very difficult to do in something like vMix, right? And again, all due respect to vMix, it's an awesome product, but for live sports where absolutely anything can happen at any given time and you need that pure flexibility, those kind of solutions lack that flexibility. So that's another piece of hardware we need to lean on. Now they're already looking at two of their large parts of their solution for broadcast technology forced into hardware because the software can't keep up with what they need to do. So then we started asking ourselves, well, how do we give them access to a production switcher remotely? How do we give them access to the router remotely? And how do we ingest all of these remote contributors and then decode them to get them into that full SDI sort of workflow. So these are the challenges we've been overcoming at Ross. We've been very successful this year, kept a lot of shows on the air. And it's really exciting to me because I think it's just actively changing the way that our profession's going to work from now on, right? If you can use a distributed model, certainly I'm not one of those guys, even though I was a director, but there are a lot of directors in the sports world that command first-class treatment when they travel, right? I mean, I'm talking about your Emmy winners and the guys who are doing the Super Bowl and the NBA Finals. If I can save umpteen thousands of dollars on just the travel costs associated with hiring one of these world-class type directors, but still give him all the tools he needs to work at home, seems like a no-brainer from a business perspective, right?
Yeah. And I guess there's so sustainability benefits as well, you know, for the industry worldwide. What other kind of, you know, what do you think this could do for the industry going forwards?
Well, yeah, I think that the most exciting thing, like I said, is the sort of limitless potential of then now being able to really distribute your network, right? For the most part in sports, you've got a lot of crews. And the crews all stick together, they all work together, and they work in their local market. And you know, if I'm doing a Fox NFL football game this Sunday in Minnesota, I know who all the local talent are. I know exactly who's going to be operating all my replay. I know who's going to be our camera people. It's the same guys it's been for years, right? The exciting thing is that we're opening up the possibilities to be whoever you want. Right? We no longer are pigeonholed into using local talent, local crews. It's, well, the crew can really stick together no matter where they're from, right? And not have to travel people, because even though you might have some local talent on all these crews, again, there's still those people. You're always your technical director, your director, your producers. They're all going to stick together no matter what town they're going to next, right? And so you don't have to travel those people anymore. You free up some of that budget to use in other places, maybe where you've been in past seasons a little bit behind, or you've needed some help, right? So, yeah, I mean, to me, it's something that was born out of necessity and will absolutely shape the future of what we do as well. And it's really the next sort of level of technology, I think.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? Okay, so Julian, I think I'm going to come to you next. What's your opinion on this? Do you think the upsurge in interest in esports during the earlier stages of lockdown to sports fans continuing to follow esports once there's a widespread return to live sports?
I think we're going through that learning process at the moment. I think as more and more live sports are returning, I think we're beginning to see what impact the activities that we've had during lockdown has had. I think one thing's for certain. I think that the wider exposure and visibility that esports has benefited over lockdown has been seen. I think we can definitely say that as part of, at least speaking of Formula One esports side, when we came back to, I mean, we're now racing in the real world, and we also launched our 2020 F1 Esports Series as well. And when we launched our 2020 F1 Esports Series, the first show that we had, we clocked the highest number of views we've ever had in any of our esports shows since, launching in 2017. We had more than 2 million viewers on digital alone. And I think that showed, that there was certainly an impact on the activities that we did. I think there's one thing I think that everyone also recognizes and acknowledges. During lockdown, we were in a very unique environment where live sports had gone dark. So, the upsurge in viewership that we saw in esports had an impact, or rather there was an impact of that on that, right? So the fact that there was no real live real life sports available meant that more people were actually considering watching esports. So there's a wider question on whether those sort of numbers can be seen again, I think the time will tell. But one thing's for sure, I think that it's certainly afforded greater visibility and I would say acceptance as well from the traditional audience perspective to actually consider, for our case, Formula One esports as an alternative racing entertainment product to enjoy. Because whilst it may not necessarily be the real race in the same sense, it's still racing. And it's still really compelling racing. And I think that's the important thing. At its core, the product itself is a very entertaining watch because, for our case, all of the cars are equalized. The drivers, they're more risk-taking because, if they crash, they're not going to hurt themselves. So they're more willing to take risks to do overtakes and stuff like that. So from a viewer's perspective, you get to see some really amazing racing that you just cannot replicate in the real world. And, you tend to see scenarios where if you follow Formula One, you see, maybe a Williams or a Haas overtaking a Mercedes, which very rarely happens in the real world. But because all the cars are equalized in esports, you do see situations like that. And it gives, Formula One fans of, say, the Williams team or the Haas team or any of the teams another touch point to engage with their team and engage with racing, maybe in a different way, but also, still get that get the racing entertainment that racing enthusiasts love.
Okay. So traditional sports broadcasters have obviously consequently aired a variety of esports formats during lockdown. BT Sport picked up the rights for the racing tournament, the V10 R League, and Eurosport screened the Celebrity Esports Tournament Solidarity Challenge. But esports are able to kind of get their fix from free platforms like Twitch and I think YouTube as well. So what can traditional TV, broadcasters and whatever, offer esports tournaments as an extra compared to, the free platforms? I think, Jose, I don't know if you've got a view on this.
Yeah, I think you cannot underestimate the exposure that traditional TV can give you. Yes, you can get all of these offerings on streaming platforms, on free-to-air platforms where you don't have to pay anything. But those platforms, you can also consider they're already saturated. If you think about someone who likes esports or competitive gaming, they already know what they want to watch. They already know the product, they know where to find it. But what traditional TV allows you is to open the market to a wider range of people. And I think that's something that we need to remember, that esports, yes, they attract a younger audience, but also you have 30 plus, 40 plus people that maybe already experienced gaming in the past years, and they have fallen off from that competitive gaming and that scene. And this reintroduces to them that there's another form of entertainment. So traditional TV allows you to expand your bubble and be able to reach a different audience. And as Julian was touching, it also allows you to allow your sponsors, your partners to reach another audience and have a conversation in a different form. And I think that allows you to tap into both audiences, your traditional sporting fan or traditional viewer and your gaming viewer. And what you want to do is cross-pollinate, right? So you want to switch them around and to show them that if you love the game, the real thing is as fun. If you love the real thing, the game allows you to take part and also be as fun as they used to. So I think traditional TV is part of the path, and we're going to see it more often. I don't think they're going to overtake traditional sports because they come with a lower legacy, but it's going to be a complementary package of entertainment, and it's the future.
Yeah, I'd 100% echo that. I think that the synergies between your real life for sports simulation, I'm speaking specifically for Formula One and would apply for sailing as well, but that synergies between the real world and the virtual world and how those two products complement each other is actually a really important one, because we work with our broadcast partners to air our esports content. We're with ESPN in the US, Sky Sports in the UK, Fox Sports in Asia, marquee broadcasters who take our real life Formula One product, but have also seen a lot of benefits taking the esports product as well, because one, there is also an element of getting the younger audience to tune in, but also it's that ability to kind of cross-pollinate between both the real product and the virtual product that actually has a lot of value. And I think there's also a lot of shoulder content as well that you can do around esports. Yes, you've got the live entertainment, but there is also a lot of ancillary content pieces that can really help tell the story of, where these kids are coming from, what backgrounds, what sort of characters they are, which I think that working with traditional broadcasters, they have the resources, they have the expertise in order to kind of sort of enrich, I suppose, the product proposition.
I think an important thing to consider too, though, and this is again coming from like the traditional esports, which are generally not sports simulations. It's usually pretty high fantasy or sci-fi kind of stuff. And I've done a number of productions on like, national television or cable networks here in the United States. And it can be really difficult to pigeonhole a television format or to pigeonhole an esports tournament into a television format. The first television format I ever got from ESPN2 wanted me to produce a 7-act show out of an esports match. And I was like, this is literally a 3-act show. And the second act is 45 minutes long. And there's no room for a commercial break the entire time. I can't force the players to pause because it'll be open rebellion, from the players. And I can't just cut to a commercial because this is like boxing here. If you cut away from the boxers mid-round, you could lose your job because you could miss the knockout punch. It's the same thing in esports, right?
Yeah.
And then the other thing is the broadcasters, the networks at least, the carriers, right, need to be flexible. And I had to explain to them, because they also wanted to pigeonhole me into a 60-minute format. And I had to try to explain to them, look, you need to be ready with some backup content, because I could come in really light. I could come in 52 minutes, and then what do you want me to do? Just talk about it for 8 more minutes, and that could be 52 minutes after we've gone through replays and analysis and interviews and trophy shots, and we beat it to death. And we're still 8 minutes light for air, right? So you should have some stuff backed up. And then I would also recommend whatever's following me be on tape and be something that could easily be interrupted to stay with me, because I might also need 67, 68 minutes if the match goes long, right? And you work with the business people on buying back that time, whatever, and so that can be kind of the challenge for the broadcasters, right? Is some of these games, I mean, gosh, I've seen a League of Legends match as short as 18 minutes, and I've seen one as long as 35, 45 minutes. And so how, as a broadcaster, you're focused on that advertising dollar. How do you pigeonhole that? Well, you've just got to be flexible and accept, okay, it's kind of like, it's like football or soccer, right? Except it's unpredictable, because in soccer, at least, well, no, it's 45 minutes, then you'll have your halftime to do all that, and then it's another 45 uninterrupted. It's kind of like football or soccer, but it has to be flexible. And otherwise, you can't really pigeonhole it into those traditional TV formats.
Nice. So some interesting points, I guess, for growth, there's some cross-pollination required between, the traditional esports online platforms and then the big broadcasters. But perhaps, there's some quite stark differences in the way that the formats are made. I think we've got a couple more minutes maybe to ask a question from the audience. So I've got one here from Nick Kennelly. Hope I'm saying it right. This is, I think, probably for you, Julian. It says, do you think motorsport esports needs real racing drivers to make good TV?
Sorry, Cara, there's a little bit of interference.
Oh, okay. You might be able to see it actually on the chat screen we've got here, but it's a question from Nick Kennelly. He says, do you think motorsport esports needs real racing drivers to make a good TV?
I think it really depends on the product itself, because I think it really, depending on how you position it. The way we look at esports is not just as a single kind of product that we can use. I mean, at its very core, it is the professional gaming side of things, and that's the traditional definition of esports. And our F1 esports series are centered around that. And we're able to create really compelling entertainment racing through through that channel. But when we put on the virtual Grand Prix and we invited the real life Formula One drivers to participate in our series, I think there is also a strategic element where we thought, actually, these are Formula One drivers where they are professional racing drivers with real life cars. They're not professional gamers on the official Formula One game. So there has to be an appreciation for how they would adapt and perform on the game itself. A lot of them actually took to it like a fish in water, actually, because I think there are a lot of overlaps as well, which as a genre within esports, we're very fortunate with Formula One, where in esports, we're competing with the wheel and we're competing with a pedal and a simulator. So there are a lot of sort of overlaps with the real world, which facilitates that transition. So we were able to get the real life Formula One drivers really engaged into our game and really performing really, really strongly on the game. But I think there is also still a wider appreciation that they're not professional gamers themselves. So you need to tailor, and we, this is what we do. We tailor our different esports product depending on the audiences we want to hit, the objectives that we want to serve. So I think that if you are if you are open and creative to how you think about using esports as a solution towards filling different objectives, you will be able to create different esports products that serve different needs, whether you involve the real life Formula One drivers or racing drivers, or if you don't and have a competition that's focused entirely by the gamers. I think there is something for everyone there. It's just about knowing exactly who your audience is and how you can create a product to help serve those different needs.
Okay, thank you. I think that's it. That's all we've got in terms of questions from the undoubtedly huge virtual crowd we pulled for this esports panel. I want to thank our panel, obviously, Cameron, Julian and Jose. Thanks for joining me.